Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026. And I have to say, just looking at the news ticker today, the world feels, well, chaotic might be a massive understatement at this point.
That is certainly one way to put it. It's been a rough morning for the headlines.
I mean, just glancing at the feeds before we sat down to record today, we've got the conflict in Iran escalating, and now there are confirmed U.S. casualties, which obviously changes the temperature in the room significantly.
Right, it's just the entire geopolitical landscape.
Exactly. And on top of that, we've got Maersk halting shipping in the Red Sea again. And if you remember 2024, you know that is going to be an absolute nightmare for the global supply chain.
No, absolutely.
Plus, there's Japan overhauling its energy and climate targets, political tension boiling over pretty much everywhere you look. It feels heavy out there.
It does. It feels like history is moving very, very fast right now, and not necessarily in a direction that makes anyone feel secure. It's that specific type of modern anxiety where you feel like you need a master's degree in geopolitics just to understand why your coffee pods are suddenly more expensive.
Right, or why you can't get a specific part for your car. And usually when the world feels like it's on fire like this, when the macro level stuff is just too much to process, the natural human instinct is to retreat.
To find a safe harbor.
Yeah, to maybe buy a really, really comfortable piece of furniture, lock the door, and just hide from it all.
To seek comfort. I mean, it's a basic survival mechanism. It's the brain saying, I cannot control the Straits of Hormuz, but I can certainly control the thread count of these sheets.
Right. But, and this is the huge, massive but we are unpacking for you today, what if that retreat into comfort is actually, what if it's dangerous?
And we don't mean dangerous like you'll get lazy and stop going to the gym.
No, I mean dangerous like you might accidentally become a villain. What if the quiet, creeping danger isn't just the geopolitical instability outside, but the really comfortable couch you just bought for your living room?
That is the counterintuitive question we're tackling today. We are looking at a fascinating, highly satirical, and yet deeply unsettling theory called the couch-to-hate crime pipeline.
I absolutely love this title. But I have to admit, when I first read it, I was pretty skeptical. Couch to hate crime. It sounds like clickbait.
It does sound extreme.
It sounds like an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I love my couch. My couch has never hurt anyone. It's soft, it's beige, it holds me when I'm tired. How on earth do you get from soft beige upholstery to a hate crime?
It sounds like a massive stretch, doesn't it? But that's exactly why we need to dig into the source material. This concept comes from a blog post by an author writing under the pseudonym Barackface. The post is titled, Comfort is a Gateway Drug, a field guide to your slow-motion villain origin story.
It's such a great title.
It is. And while the tone of the piece is incredibly funny and satirical, the core thesis they're presenting is dead serious.
Okay, so lay out the thesis for us. How exactly is comfort a gateway drug?
So the theory is that comfort insulates us. When we get too comfortable, our world shrinks. We start to view our specific, highly curated, comfortable experience or, our quiet street, our specific type of coffee, our orderly queue at the grocery store. We view that as the universal standard.
It's a TED.
Right. It becomes the default setting for humanity. And once your brain decides that your life is the standard, anything that deviates from that standard, well, you don't just see it as different anymore. You start to see it as a glitch.
An error in the system.
Exactly. Or worse, a threat.
So it's not that the couch itself is evil. It's that the couch makes you feel like the king of a very small kingdom. And suddenly you start wanting to defend the borders of that kingdom way too aggressively.
Precisely. It is the slow-motion villain origin story. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just summarizing a clever blog post today. We are going to walk you through the 6-month timeline of how a perfectly nice, normal person, someone who probably listens to shows like this one, becomes a villain without ever realizing it.
We're going to map this out phase by phase.
Yeah.
And we aren't just staying in the realm of satire, right? Because if we just joke about homeowners associations for the next hour, we're really missing the point.
Correct. To really understand the stakes here, we have to cross-reference the satirical timeline with some much heavier realities. We've pulled sidebar sources on the history of U.S. immigration laws to essentially fact-check the arguments our hypothetical villain will make.
Right.
We also have analysis from Trevor Noah on the psychology of polite racism. And perhaps most disturbingly, we have reporting from CNN and Sky News about a group in Arkansas calling themselves Return to the Land.
Yeah, I watched the footage from that Arkansas story when I was prepping, and wow, We're going to get there in phase 2, and let me tell you, it stops being funny real quick. That
Sure.
is where the rubber meets the road on this theory.
It is the extreme end of the spectrum, certainly, but it operates on the exact same logic as the guy complaining about his neighbor's lawn. That's what makes this deep dive so important. We need to see the link between comfort and extremism.
All right, let's start the clock then. It's month 1, phase 1, the setup.
The setup.
So according to our source, this doesn't start with a manifesto.
Yeah.
You don't wake up one day and decide to be a bigot. It starts with interior design.
Right.
You get a promotion, you move to a slightly nicer neighborhood, you buy that nice couch,
Yeah.
you discover the absolute joys of sparkling water.
It's the accumulation of small privileges. You establish a baseline of comfort that feels earned. And that word, earned, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Because once you feel you've earned this peace and quiet, you become hyper-vigilant about protecting it.
The source says the red flag gently unfolds the moment you say something like, I just think people should assimilate a little more. No, let's be honest. That sounds totally reasonable to a lot of people, doesn't it?
It really does. And that is the trick of it. It sounds like you're just asking for social cohesion. But usually when someone in this phase says assimilate, they don't mean follow the laws and pay your taxes. They mean act exactly like me.
So welcome to month 1. This is the just asking questions phase. The setting is brunch. Obviously, it's brunch.
It is always brunch.
You've upgraded from diner coffee to single origin pour over. You're feeling sophisticated, and you lean back, look at someone who doesn't look exactly like you, maybe a new friend of a friend at the table. You drop the classic line. So where are you really from?
Ah, yes. The eternal question.
And when they say, I'm from Ohio or I'm from Cleveland, you double down. You do that little squint and say, no, but like originally.
Yeah.
And then the kicker, the one that really stings. Wow, you speak English so well.
Let's pause and unpack this right here, because I know there are listeners thinking, wait a minute, isn't that just curiosity? Isn't it a good thing to be interested in people's backgrounds and heritage?
Right, I've absolutely asked people where they're from. Does that make me a villain?
Context is everything here. The source calls this being a cartographer of bias. When you ask a white person from Ohio where they are from and they say Ohio, the conversation usually ends there. You accept that they belong there.
Yeah.
But when you ask a person of color and they say Ohio, and you keep digging for a quote-unquote real answer, what are you actually doing in that moment?
You're implying that Ohio can't possibly be the real answer.
Exactly. You are signaling that they do not belong here. They must be from somewhere else. By pushing for original, you are reinforcing the idea that here belongs to you and they are merely a guest. It's a power dynamic disguised as polite chit-chat.
It's othering.
Precisely. And the source notes the outcome of month 1 is that you mentally create what they call a cultural authenticity index. You start subtly ranking your neighbors based on things like how spicy their cooking smells in the hallway.
Which is funny, but also I have seen this happen in real time. People say, oh, I love Indian food, but do they really have to cook it on a Tuesday? The hallway smells like cumin.
That is the beginning of the arc right there. You're judging people's existence based on how it impacts your sensory comfort. Your food is delicious in a restaurant downtown, but it's an intrusion in my hallway. And I think this connects really well to one of our sidebar sources, a clip from Trevor Noah discussing being Black in America.
Oh, that was a fantastic clip. I rewatched it specifically for this deep dive.
Noah makes a really brilliant distinction between South African racism, the racism he grew up with under apartheid, and American racism. He says South African racism was explicit. It was furious. It was, you cannot come in here. It was incredibly clear.
Right, you knew exactly where you stood, terrifying as it was.
But he describes American racism, and this applies perfectly to the comfort villain, as being defined by politeness. It's this smiling face at the desk that says, we just don't have any vacancies right now. Or, we just think you'd be happier in a different neighborhood.
It's the just asking questions phase in action. It's not a slur. It's a polite inquiry that serves to exclude. I'm just asking if you have a resident sticker for the pool. Just checking.
Exactly. In month 1, the villain doesn't think they're a villain at all. They think they're just observant. They think they are a good neighbor who just wants to know who is in the building for safety reasons. But the foundation is being laid. You are drawing a circle, and you are putting yourself right in the center and others on the periphery.
And that circle gets a lot tighter in month 2. This is what the source calls the it's just a preference era.
This is where the shift really happens. We move from questions to statements. The mask slips just a millimeter.
And we get the prelude, the phrase that, as the source says, historians have noted, is the opening chord of a very bad song. I'm not racist, but
Whenever you hear that but, you know the next sentence is going to be disqualifying. It's the verbal equivalent of holding your nose before jumping into a sewer.
The examples in the text are painful because they are so incredibly common.
Huh.
I just prefer neighborhoods that feel cohesive. Or, I'm all for diversity, as long as it's done the right way. Or, the big one, it's not about race, it's about culture.
Let's really unpack that culture argument because that is the most common shield used today. It's not race, it's culture. It sounds sophisticated. It sounds like you're talking about shared values or history. But the source has a brilliant cutting definition for what these people actually mean by culture.
I laughed out loud at this when I read it, and then I cringed. The source defines culture in this specific context as people who own the same patio furniture as me.
It sounds absurd, but think about the sociology of it. Patio furniture is a proxy. It's a proxy for class, for aesthetic, for a certain type of consumer behavior. When people say they want a cohesive neighborhood, they often mean they want a neighborhood where everyone buys from the same catalogs, maintains their lawns to the same obsessive standard, and adheres to the same silent social contracts.
It's the HOA mindset, fully weaponized. Architectural harmony and vibes. If your door is painted too bright, or your car is too old, or your music is too loud, you aren't just annoying, you are actively eroding the culture.
Yes, and the source jokes that the outcome here is starting a subcommittee that bans wind chimes. But this is where I want to pivot, because while banning wind chimes is petty and ridiculous, the underlying logic of cohesion and shared culture has a much, much darker endpoint.
You're talking about the return to the land story from Arkansas.
I am. We need to spend some time here, because this is the reality check of the deep dive. We have reporting here from both CNN and Sky News about an organization in the Ozarks of Arkansas.
Paint the picture for us. Because on the surface, if you just glance at it, it looks kind of nice.
That is the whole point. If you look at the B-roll footage the news crew shot, it's beautiful. Dense green forests, rustic wooden cabins, people gardening, kids playing in the dirt. It looks like a hipster cottagecore dream. It looks like the ultimate comfort retreat from modern society.
But then you actually listen to what the people there are saying.
Right. This is a group explicitly building a community for white people. They don't always use the slur-heavy language of the 1960s KKK. They use the language of the comfort villain. They talk about safety. They talk about heritage. They talk about wanting to live among like-minded people.
I have the transcript here from the Sky News report. One of the leaders says, "We just want to be with our own kind. Is that a crime? We just want a place where we understand each other."
That is the ultimate. It's just a preference defense taken to its logical conclusion. I just prefer to be with my own kind. But look at the mechanism. It starts with wanting comfort and cohesion. It starts with feeling like the outside world is too chaotic, too many different languages, too much conflict. So they retreat. They buy the couch, or in this case, the cabin in the woods, and to protect that comfort, they have to physically exclude everyone else.
The reporter in that video, though, points out the visual contrast so well. You have these cozy cabins, but then you pan over and there's a perimeter fence. There are flags flying with symbols that looks suspiciously like rebranded hate symbols.
And that is exactly why the patio furniture analogy is so powerful, because it highlights how we sanitize exclusion. The people in Arkansas probably tell themselves every day that they aren't hating anyone, they're just loving their own, they're just preserving their culture. But the result is a literal whites-only compound in the year 2026.
So the link between the suburban mom saying, "I just want the neighborhood to stay nice," and the separatist out in Arkansas it's shorter than we like to think.
The logic is identical. The intensity is different, sure. One bans wind chimes, the other bans black people. But the root fear, the fear that difference equals a degradation of your quality of life, is exactly the same. The villain arc is just a matter of how far down that path you are willing to take that fear.
That is incredibly sobering.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've moved from just asking questions to building walls. Now, in month 3, our villain needs to justify these feelings. Because nobody wants to sit there and admit they're just scared or biased. They need intellectual backup. Enter the data guy transformation.
Ah, yes, the discovery of statistics, or as I like to call it, the memification of sociology.
But we're not talking about, like, downloading a massive data set from the Census Bureau and running a complex regression analysis.
God, no. We are talking about the data guy who confidently says, statistically speaking, but never actually cites the source, or the guy who says, well, I saw a chart once, or the classic conversation stopper. You can't argue with numbers.
And the reality check, of course, is that the numbers usually come from a JPEG that has been compressed 40 times, has a blatant typo in the headline, and was originally created by a user named something like Eagle Patriot 69.
This is the era of pseudo-intellectualism. Comfort allows people to feel informed without doing any of the actual work. If a piece of data confirms your pre-existing bias, that your patio furniture culture is superior or under threat, you accept it instantly. You don't vet it. You don't ask, who made this chart? What was their methodology? You just say, see, I knew it.
The outcome for month 3 is that you start forwarding 11-paragraph emails to your family that end with the phrase, wake up. Which, by the way, if you ever receive an email that ends with wake up, just delete it immediately. Nothing good has ever followed that phrase.
I really want to connect this to the specific type of data this guy usually loves to share. It almost always circles back to immigration.
Right, they're not sending their best. Or look at the crime rates, or the one I hear the absolute most.
Hmm.
My ancestors came here the right way. Why can't these people just get in line?
The right way. That is the data guy's absolute favorite phrase. It sounds so logical. It sounds fair. It implies there is a clearly defined line, and some people are just cutting it out of disrespect for the law. But we have a source here from DW History, a really excellent documentary titled, Here's How America's Immigration Policies Have a Racist Past. And we need to deep dive into this, because the data guy is almost always dead wrong about history.
Okay, lay it on me.
Yeah.
Because my own grandfather came from Italy in the 1920s. And the family story is always, he followed the rules, he did it right.
Okay, let's look at the rules back then. For a huge chunk of American history, prior to the 1920s, if you were coming from Europe, there was no process in the modern sense. You didn't apply for a visa at an embassy in Rome and wait 5 years for a background check. You bought a boat ticket. You showed up at Ellis Island. They checked your eyes for trachoma, asked if you were an anarchist, and if you weren't dying of a communicable disease or actively plotting a revolution, you were in.
So the line was basically just the physical cue to get off the boat.
For Europeans, yes. But here is where the data guy completely misses the point. While your grandfather was walking through Ellis Island, there were other people who were completely banned based solely on their race. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first major law to ban an entire ethnic group. It didn't matter if you were a genius, a hard worker, or a saint. If you were Chinese, the legal way simply did not exist for you. It was a closed door.
So when people today say, why don't they just come legally, they are ignoring the fact that for many people, the law was intentionally designed to make it impossible.
And it gets even more specific than that. Let's talk about the National Origins Act of 1924. This is the law that likely governed right around when your grandfather's generation was settling in. The U.S. government looked at the census from 1890, not the current census of their time, but one from 34 years prior, and said we will only accept immigrants in proportion to the people who were already here in 1890.
Wait, why 1890? Why reach back 3 decades?
Because in 1890, most Americans were Northern European, Protestant, British, German, Scandinavian. By 1920, too many Italians, Jews, and Eastern Europeans were arriving for the government's liking. So they rigged the math. They set the quotas to heavily favor the Nordic stock and drastically cut the numbers for everyone else.
So the legal system was essentially just an algorithm designed to keep America white and Protestant.
Exactly. It was blatant social engineering. So when the data guy says, my grandfather followed the rules, he's completely ignoring that the rules were rigged in his grandfather's favor. He had a VIP pass, while others had a do not enter sign bolted to the door.
That really destroys the whole moral high ground of the argument, doesn't it? It's not actually about law and order, it's about access.
But the data guy doesn't want to know that. He wants the chart that shows he is right. He uses a highly sanitized, cherry-picked version of history to justify his current discomfort with demographic change. He uses fake history to prop up his villainy.
It's confirmation bias on absolute steroids. And once they feel intellectually superior with their fake data, once they've convinced themselves that history and math are firmly on their side, they start feeling bold enough to make jokes. Welcome to month 4. The comedy defense paired closely with month 5. The algorithm.
These two go hand in hand perfectly. This is where the toxicity starts to really bubble up in social situations.
Month 4 is the comedy defense. You're at a party, maybe you've had a couple of drinks, and you start testing out edgy jokes. You say something questionable, something leaning hard on stereotypes.
And when the room goes quiet, because most people are decent and generally don't like bigotry ruining their Friday night, you hit them with the defense. Relax, it's just humor. Or, God, people are too sensitive these days. You can't say anything anymore.
If we can't laugh at ourselves, what can we laugh at?
But as the source points out brilliantly, you are not laughing at yourself. You are laughing at someone else, usually someone with significantly less power than you in society. And then you're looking around the room nervously to see if anyone chuckled or clapped. You're seeking validation for your bias.
This brings us right back to Trevor Noah. In his special, he talks extensively about how humor works. Humor can be a tool for truth, or it can be a weapon for exclusion. When Noah jokes about racism, he's exposing the absurdity of the system. He's punching up or punching at the structure itself.
Right, true satire challenges power. But the comfort villain is always punching down. They're using humor to test the waters. Can I say this? Is this acceptable in this group? It's a probe to find out who else in the room thinks like them.
And if they get pushback, if someone says, hey, that's not cool, they immediately retreat to the comedy defense. I was just joking. You're being the thought police. It's a coward's way to introduce bigoted ideas while maintaining plausible deniability. I didn't say I hate them, I just told a joke.
And we have to ask, where do they get these jokes? Where do they get this worldview that tells them these jokes are not only true, but funny? That brings us to month 5. The algorithm did its stage.
This is where the trap snaps completely shut.
This is where you claim, I don't see race, or the algorithm just shows me stuff, I don't choose it. You pretend you are a passive observer of the internet, but look at your feed.
The source describes the feed so perfectly. It is 70% outrage bait and 30% slow cooker recipes.
That combination is lethal. Think about the psychology of mixing those two things. The slow cooker recipes or the puppy videos or the DIY home renovation clips, they keep you comfortable. They validate your lifestyle. Look at this delicious pot roast. Life is good. My home is my castle.
And then you swipe up.
And suddenly it's here is why they are coming to destroy your pot roast. Here is a video of a migrant committing a crime. Here's a video of a protester burning a flag.
The war on pot roast.
It sounds funny when you say it like that, but that is exactly how the radicalization funnel works. It intentionally mixes the cozy aesthetic of comfort with the adrenaline of a threat. It tells you, you have something beautiful, and those people want to take it away from you.
And the delusion, according to the source, is believing you are an independent thinker.
Yeah.
You're sitting on your couch thinking, man, I've really connected the dots here. I'm seeing the truth the mainstream media won't show me. Meanwhile, you are sharing the exact same hot take as 400,000 other independent thinkers.
You just become a node in the network. The source says you end up describing yourself at parties as being red-pilled about zoning laws.
Red-pilled. For those who somehow managed to avoid the worst parts of the internet for the last decade, that's a reference to The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Taking the red pill to wake up and see the truth.
Yes, but in this political context, it really just means I have accepted a conspiracy theory that perfectly validates my prejudices. You aren't just a guy who likes a quiet street anymore. You're a warrior for zoning integrity. You honestly believe that multifamily housing is a deliberate plot to destroy Western civilization.
And this leads us inevitably to month 6, the final form. The chrysalis opens, and out comes the concerned citizen.
Concerned citizen, the most dangerous archetype of all.
This is the event horizon. You start actively attending town hall meetings. You stand up at the microphone. You aren't making edgy jokes anymore. You are deadly serious. And you say, I'm just concerned about the direction things are going. This used to be such a nice place. We need to preserve our way of life.
And if you ask them to actually define way of life, they can't really do it without sounding deeply exclusionary. As the source says, it basically boils down to quiet lawns and limited seasoning.
Limited seasoning is the hill they are genuinely willing to die on.
But notice the shift in language here. It's no longer I prefer. It's we must preserve. It has become an existential struggle. The villain now firmly believes they are the hero of the story. They believe they are the last line of defense.
Defense against what exactly?
Against change, against discomfort, against the other.
The warning signs that you are rapidly approaching the hate crime event horizon are listed as feeling personally attacked by multilingual menus at a restaurant, believing festivals that aren't for your specific demographic are getting out of hand, and thinking someone saying happy holidays is a direct violent assault on your living room.
It's the speed run to the how did I end up on the evening news campaign. This is where people call the cops on a black bird watcher in Central Park. This is where people harass a family speaking Spanish in a grocery store aisle. This is where the return to the land mindset manifests in everyday suburbia.
It's terrifying because it's so banal. It's not someone twirling a mustache plotting evil. It's just someone obsessed with a neighborhood character.
And that brings us to the science of it all. Why does this happen? The source calls it comfort-induced bias. But let's break down the actual cognitive science operating here.
Yeah. What is going on in the brain? Why does buying a nice sofa make us hate wind chimes?
It's all about heuristics. mental shortcuts. The brain absolutely loves efficiency. When you are comfortable, when you are surrounded by people who look like you, vote like you, and act like you, your brain creates a shortcut. It says, this is normal, this is safe.
So my life equals the universal standard.
Exactly. And once that rigid shortcut is established in your neural pathways, anything that deviates from it, a different language, a different volume level, a different aesthetic, the brain doesn't process it as neutral variation. It processes it as an error, a glitch.
Like a software bug.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the brain wants to fix the bug. It triggers a physical threat response. Your amygdala fires. You feel anxious. You feel annoyed. You feel unsafe. Not because you are actually unsafe, but because your pattern-matching software has found an anomaly.
So your brain, which should be used for critical thinking or, I don't know, remembering your Netflix password, decides to become a part-time anthropologist with zero training. You start diagnosing problems in society that are actually just differences.
And I want to zoom out here. We really have to look at the date again. It's March 1st, 2026.
Yes. The global backdrop.
We started the show with the news ticker. War with Iran, U.S. casualties confirmed, a total supply chain collapse with Maersk, climate targets shifting in Japan. The world is facing legitimate, massive, life-altering challenges, real suffering, real displacement of people.
It's a legitimately scary time.
And against that massive, chaotic backdrop, look at the concerned citizen. Look at what they are focusing their vital energy on.
They're worried about wind chimes. They're worried about multilingual menus at the local diner.
This is the ultimate tragedy of comfort. It insulates the villain from the real world so effectively that they literally have to invent problems just to feel significant. While the world navigates a war in the Middle East, this person is waging a holy war against a neighbor's unmowed lawn.
It's petty. It's incredibly petty. But as we've established with the Arkansas story, it's a dangerous pettiness. Because when people with power, even localized power, like an HOA board or a suburban voting bloc, focus on these invented grievances, real people get hurt. Policy gets made based on that pettiness.
That's the key. The concerned citizen votes. The concerned citizen calls the police. The concerned citizen creates the cultural environment where the return to the land group feels validated in building their compound.
So if we look at the forecast, if this progression goes untreated, where does the pipeline ultimately end?
The forecast is grim. Phase A is, I just think people should, Phase B is, someone should really do something about, and Phase C is, I mean, if someone did something, I'd understand.
That Phase C is chilling.
Yeah.
That's the tacit approval of violence. I wouldn't do it myself, but I get why they did it.
And the social consequence of reaching that phase is that your friends start making elaborate seating arrangements at weddings just to ensure they aren't legally adjacent to you. You isolate yourself. You end up in an echo chamber of other concerned citizens, endlessly reinforcing each other's delusions until you are completely detached from reality.
And there is a massive, hopeful bin, but here, we are not fatalists on this show. The source is very clear that this is reversible.
It is absolutely reversible. We have an intervention plan. You can get off the pipeline.
The good news is you don't actually have to become a villain. If you catch yourself in month 2 or month 3, maybe you just made a joke that didn't land, or you just blindly forwarded a questionable email from your uncle, you can turn the ship around.
So what are the actionable steps? How do we actively break the addiction to comfort?
Step 1, upgrade your curiosity. The source says, diversify your dinner invitations. And I don't mean that in a shallow performative way. I mean, actually hang out with people who do not own your patio furniture.
And listen to them. Don't interrogate them. Don't ask them, where are you really from? Ask them, what was your experience with this? And this is the hardest part for the data guy, shut up and listen.
Step 2, fact check your memes. Please, if a chart perfectly confirms everything you already believe, if it makes you feel smug and superior, be highly suspicious of it. Go find the primary source.
If the chart says immigration is destroying America, go read about the 1924 National Origins Act. Go read about the Chinese Exclusion Act. Add historical context to your data. Complexity is the enemy of bigotry.
Step 3, retire the phrase, I'm just being honest. Because let's face it, that is almost always a cover for just being a jerk.
Instead, try adopting new scripts. Tell me more. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe I don't know everything.
Maybe I don't know everything. That right there is the kryptonite to the villain arc.
Villain arcs collapse when exposed to humility. The moment you admit that your normal isn't the universal normal, the bubble pops. You stop defending the fortress and you start actually exploring the world.
And that leads to the alternative origin story. Comfort doesn't have to be a drug that stupefies you. It can be a resource.
Right. If you have the privilege of comfort, financial security, a nice home, free time perk, you are incredibly lucky. You have a surplus. You can use that resource to fund travel, to fund conversation, to extend empathy to those who don't have that comfort. Comfort can expand your world instead of shrinking it.
It dramatically reduces the odds of you starting a neighborhood subcommittee
Yeah.
about patio furniture.
Which, frankly, is a win for everyone involved.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the couch to hate crime pipeline, what is the one thing you want our listener to take away today?
I think it's the provocative thought at the very end of the source material. In a world increasingly defined by algorithms that feed us exactly what we want, and a physical world where we can literally pay to avoid inconvenience, have we lost the ability to be uncomfortable?
That is the question. Are our muscles for discomfort atrophying?
If comfort is the gateway drug, maybe inconvenience is the cure. Maybe we need to actively seek out situations where we aren't the expert, where we don't know the unwritten rules, where we have to listen instead of speak, where the food smells different and the music is loud.
Being uncomfortable is good for you. It keeps you from becoming the person who calls the cops on a family barbecue.
Exactly. Growth happens in the uncomfortable zone. Stagnation and ultimately villainy happens on the couch.
So, if you're listening to this, your mission this week, check your cultural authenticity index. Are you quietly ranking your neighbors? And maybe, just maybe, skip the HOA meeting this month and go have a conversation with someone who confuses you.
And please, for the love of history, fact-check that email before you forward it.
Seriously. Wake up is not a citation. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time. Stay curious.
Stay uncomfortable.
I like that. Stay uncomfortable. Bye, everyone.